Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about playing white in the Queen's Gambit accepted. So this is the position after d takes c4 by black, and there are a number of moves here that white can play. Knight f6, f3 rather, which is the most common, e3, which is the move I recommend, and e4, which is going to be the subject of this video. The reason I like e3 is I think it's just easier to play. You're more certain of getting your pawn back. I mean, actually, you usually get your pawn back anyway. But playing e4 is more ambitious. You're trying to do two things at once: take over the centre and get your pawn back at some point. And trying to do two things at once, well, if you can get away with it, brilliant. But it gives black more chances to make a more complicated game. The other thing about an e3 type of game is that you very often end up in an isolated queen pawn position where you know what you're doing. E4 tends to lead to different sorts of positions where you need to learn more different sorts of positions. So it's less easy to play. But anyhow, let's get stuck in. Black will play one of four moves, I guess, either hitting back in the centre with c5 or e5, or they might put the knights out, either knight to c6, knight to f6, to try and tempt your pawns forward and show that they're weak or that you've been too greedy. And let's look at those each in turn. e5 is the most common and not a bad move by any means, and if your opponent plays this way, I think the most sensible way to respond is to play knight to f3. And now black usually replies e takes d4. That's the main line. Black can play instead bishop to b4 check, and it's not a bad idea. Not very popular, but not bad. Knight to c3, and then takes and takes. And you've got a kingside majority and nice development, and that should be enough. If black continues, as they may well do, knight to e7, bishop takes c4, knight on b to c6, they're hoping to develop quickly and get some simplifications. Bishop to e3 now by white, and castles by black. So both sides have got fairly free development, but you do have the better centre. And I think in this position the easiest way to play here for black, which I'm following Larry Kaufman's recommendations, is a3. Just trying to take the bishop pair, and knight to a5, bishop to e2 now, and you just got better chances. Tournaments practice shows that white has the better game here, and you've got white's queenside split pawns don't seem to be terribly serious. Actually, I can think of examples where split pawns hold back a majority better than connected pawns. It's not obvious how black's going to create a pass pawn out of that, although I'll say the weaknesses are there. Meanwhile, you've got good chances of attacking on the king side with your kingside majority and bishop pair, and the position suits the bishops very well, being open. So I think that's as complicated as you need to get against this bishop to b4 sideline. E takes d4, bishop takes c4 on again, and now black can play knight, so bishop to b4 check again in this position. Knight bd2 is the other way of playing it, rather than so now we can't play knight to c3, of course. Bishop d2 is the alternative, and now both sides develop. Knight to f6, and now I think poke the knight, and in this position we can go back to our a3 plan, but knight to b3 I think is the best move. And after knight to b6, now bishop to g5 is popular here, but let's play bishop to b5, and now, well, lots of things that can be tried here. After bishop to b7, I think queen e2, castles I think you take, but the most common move after bishop to b5 is queen to d5. And now the right approach here is takes on c6 check, queen takes on c6, which is the best move, and now take on d4. So you've got your pawn back, and I don't think you're going to miss the two bishops here because your pieces are nicely active. Queen d5, queen c2, or queen e2, I guess. Bishop to g4, rook to d1, bishop to g5, pushing the rook around, pushing the bishop around, pushing the other bishop around. And it's this, you know, it's not. Black was very ambitious and with active development, but they couldn't really hang on to it with all the without control of the centre. And now takes and a4, and it seems to me here that you've got a nice active position. You've got a bit of an attack going on the queen side, and the fact that you've got a knight against a bishop, I don't think is of any consequence here at all. So this position is a bit better for white. So going back to bishop takes on c4, knight to c6 is a tricky line. Not an easy position for either side. Castles, and now bishop to e6. And I recommend that you play here bishop takes e6, messing up the pawns. Queen to b3, takes on b7, and queen a6, and now knight to f6 and knight bd2 is you know, a fair way to play for white. So that's the main line. Larry Kaufman again would rather play slightly differently. In fact, with so after bishop to e6, avoid the exchange and play bishop to b5, and here bishop to c5. And we're going to poke the bishop, and here bishop to b2 is okay, but we'll play a4, and after a6 takes a5, bishop a7, bishop b2, knight f6, and here Ruslan Sherbakov, who writes for Chess Publishing, or summarises work for Chess Publishing, said here that that this is a perfectly acceptable position for black, and that we ought to play something else as white. But Larry Kaufman has said it's perfectly okay to try and play bishop takes d4 here, and after knight takes e4, which Sherbakov recommends, takes on a7, queen swap, rook takes a7, and now knight to d4 is Kaufman's idea. And you know, might be right. If you fancy this position for white, then here it is. Otherwise you can play one of the alternatives we've talked about elsewhere. So well, that's just the e5 line, so you can tell this is already a more complicated way to play for white. But let's look at some of the others. The pawn move with c5 tends not to be so the other pawn move with c5 tends not to be so common and is not so hard to deal with, I think. Just play d5, take over the centre as you're invited to, and after knight to c3 to protect the pawns. Black can go b5, trying to be awkward with the queenside pawns, bishop to f4, and now after bishop to a6, I think the idea knight to f3, and after b4 bishop takes b8 is best for white, an idea of Alexei Sherov, and check on a4, takes on a6, and now rook b1 and rook takes b8. So all rather complicated, and now knight to e5, which looks very tempting, can be well met by queen to c7, which was a Sherov game. But Kaufman just says, you know, just take on c4, and that might be enough to make black give up on this whole line. Rook to b6, queen to a3. I mean, knight e5 is also a possibility. knight takes e4, and now rook takes b2, and black is just very behind in development. It's going to take quite a while for black to get castled and safe, whereas white's pieces are rather busy and nicely active. White just needs to castle and to complete development. So that's the c5 line, and we'll go back and look at the knight moves now. Knight to f6, and again I think you're being invited to press on with e5, so do that. Chase the knight around and see where that ends up. And now, I mean, there's different moves that black can play here, but usually you go knight to b6, retreat the bishop to d3, and bishop to b3 is the alternative. And now knight to c6, bishop to e3, bishops before knights this time, but not a bad way to play. And now black's got can play this slowly with bishop to e6, queen to d7, and so on. And white's best way of meeting this is with knight on g to e2. You can also play with knight to f3, but let's go knight ge2, keeping everything nice and solid. And if knight to b4, bishop e4, bishop f5, and we'll swap, castle, queen ones are away, knight to f4, e6, there's a big fight going on for the d5 square, rook to c1, I mean there is a big fight going on for d5, but I don't know if it matters too much. And now knight to e4. Larry Kaufman in his book says here the right move for black is knight takes a2. If your opponent manages to play that in a game, I think I'd have a word with the arbiter, and quite what was intended here I don't know, but just visually white's nicely centralised, slightly the worst bishop, but black's bishop doesn't have an obvious square to go to either, and white can hope to press, maybe to play the knight around to c5 is one idea. Press forward with f5 on with a pawn, and or actually you've got a weak pawn on c7 to have a go at. That the knight doesn't really want to be in front of that pawn, so you might be able to gang up on c7. And this is an okay sort of position. And that's if black decides to play it slowly with bishop to e6. Instead of bishop to e6, knight to b4 is the other way of approaching it. And now there's lots of complications here, and I'm guessing white can just play bishop to e4, and if what could we play here? I mean c6, knight d2, trying to play around the d5 square. And one example line here given by Sherbakov goes like this, and white's moves aren't hard to find, which I always like. Keep your bishop pair, and white completes development with rook ac1, and I don't think black's king is going to find it easy to be safe on the king side or the queen side. A game actually went king to f8, and now we create a battery against the king. That's to say that the queen and the bishop on the same diagonal, and white's going to soften up their position by playing the pawn up to h5. So that's a bit of an easier one to understand. A rather more principled way for black to play is to go with f5 in this position. Takes, and knight to c3 is the main line, and I think this is reckoned to be about equal for black. So I won't explore this much further. Just play sensibly, and I'm sure you'll be all right. Knight c6 is the last alternative here for black. Knight to f3 is too simple not to play, and black can try and get into a line of the Chigorin defence with knight to f6, but something like d5 I think is the right way to play this, and I don't think this is easy for black. So black usually plays bishop to g4, and by now I think we are rather obliged to poke it with d5. So this is what I mean about black tempting your pawns forward. Knight to e5, and now bishop to f4 is right. I mean, there are alternatives, queen d4, knight bd2 are both played, but let's play bishop to f4, and now in this main line we'll go, how shall we go, knight to g6, bishop to e3. You can go to g3, but let's go to e3, e5 by black, and bishop to c4. And well, blacks can develop around your centre, but I think white just looks a little bit better here to me, and should be comfortable. Another way for black to play here, knight to f6 and bishop to c4, bishop takes c4 rather, nicely straightforward, and now e5, so very similar sort of position. Knight on b to d2, bishop to d6. That's not a great blockader, to be honest, and so bishop to b5 check, queen to a4, castles, and Kaufman gives castles by white as an innovation. That doesn't look too startling to me, but I'm sure the computer's right. And now a6 takes, rook fd1, rook ac1, all very natural for white, and this c7 pawn is not strong, and this bishop is not doesn't have much of a view, so this is better for white. So that's rather a whistle-stop tour through all the complications, or some of the complications. That's by no means all of them. A very complicated modern line of the Queen's Gambit. I mean, it is ambitious, so be my guest. It may well be the best line, and it is played by all the top grandmasters these days. But my heart isn't in this video really, because I don't think it's easy to play. It's definitely the main line. It's definitely ambitious, but I don't think it's one to start off with. Get something simpler sorted out, and then you can turn your attention to making your repertoire sharper. But I don't think you've got your repertoire down pat yet, and this is complicated. Anyhow, that's how to play it. I'll put some notes in the on the website, and see what you think. Bye for now.